In this video, I'm going to show you how I make bone broth. And the most important thing is to have a good sized pot. I use the enamel cast iron Dutch oven. That's what I have, that's the biggest. And I collect bones from all of our meals and I throw them in Ziploc bags in the freezer. These are the rib bones from the short ribs that I made. And it's either pork chops. What I do is I do pork and beef mixture in these bags. I separate out the chicken because I'll do a chicken broth separately. So these are all my bones that I've saved from roasts and chops, ribs, and I put it all in the pot. And I save these bags, I just fold them up and put them back in the freezer so I don't have to clean them. Fold those up. There's more of the bones. The key is to have your pot very full. So I'm using bones from, I have a little bit of pork bones that I cut the meat off for something else, so those are raw, but everything else has been cooked. And I'll show you that in the pot. This is my bag of scraps. Oh wait, I got one more big bone from a roast, a pork roast. So that's in there. So it's fold up my bag. These are my scraps that I save. All the onion ends, instead of going into compost, here's a piece of broccoli, maybe some carrot pieces, but it's mainly all the onion ends. My grandmother would be proud that I save all these. Anyhow, so I use these for my bone broth. I'll just take a handful, pink, and I'll just put a handful of the onion ends in, and they work out great. It's a good way to kind of maximize your food budget. And then I'm going to fill this with water. You can do smaller pots too if you just have a few bones. But I put in enough. I'll make broth when I have enough to fill this big pot. So let me show you what it looks like. I have it filled up pretty densely. Well, that's the key. You'll see there's some raw bones in there from pork chops. But mainly they're all cooked bones that I've saved from meals that we've had. And I'm going to boil this and we'll get started on the next step. When the broth boils, you may get some foam on top. I often do. And I will just, excuse me, I will just strain this off and discard it. And all the other bits won't matter much because we're going to strain the broth when it's done. Pulling off that foam. And I've got my herbs, I'm ready to go. This is my dried sage. I'm not using fresh because my fresh sage has not recovered yet from all of the trimming back. So this is the dried, and this is also the dried thyme. And I use these, they're fine because I strain this broth when it's done. So I will put in the stems and all, just like this, a big bunch of it, because that's all going to be pulled out by the strainer. And I like to put in a decent amount of time. If I had an abundance of fresh, I would use that, but again, I'm trying to get my thyme plant to recover from being cut back. And same thing with this. I'll just put it in with the branches, the stems, and that all will go in. Bay leaves, I don't grow these, but I will put in a couple or three bay leaves in there. I do have rosemary year-round. I've got a nice plant, and I've cut some pieces of that. And then I submerge it in. I don't salt and pepper it yet because I will simmer this down for thickness, so I don't want it to be too salty. So I will salt at the end. So I just put everything in. I do add carrot, and I just scrub it, and then I cut it into 3 pieces, and that's going to work out well because I can just pick it out, and that's just in there for flavor, and it won't be jarred with the rest of the broth. And then I'm just gonna let this simmer for most of the day. It depends, you know, you can have it overnight. Some people like to do it in a crock pot. I just do it on the stove because I'm always here. So I'm gonna put the lid on it, and the lid has to be on tight. You want all that liquid to stay in there. And I'm just gonna simmer this on low on my back burner for most of the day. It is right around noon, so definitely till at least 8 o'clock. And depending on how busy I am, I might let it go till the morning and then strain it out at that time. Just checking in at the broth. It's looking real good, and it looks very rich, nice, beautiful dark brown color. And let's see, it's 2:30, so it's been in just for 2.5 hours. And you could certainly stop it at this point, but since I'm home, I'm just gonna let it keep going, probably till, I don't know, maybe around 7 or so. Let it cool. I decided to let the broth go overnight. I just ran out of time in the evening to sort it out. So it has a beautiful, nice, warm, golden brown color. And what I'm going to do is, I have a colander set up on another stainless bowl. I'm going to scoop all of the contents out into the colander. Then I'm going to run everything through this sieve here into the jars. Now that the broth has simmered for several hours, I use a large ladle like this, and I scoop everything out into this colander. And then I will let this cool. I will pick off any of the meat that's left or cartilage on there, or just sort through all of this and pick out what I'm going to feed to the dogs, discard the bones, and then we will run all of the broth through the sieve into the jars. I'll let that cool. And since everything is pretty hot, I like to just use this glass cup, measuring cup, and I just pour it right through. I fill up the sieve, I just dump it into the pile. I'm filling this jar up to the top because I'm going to keep this in the refrigerator. If I was going to freeze these jars, which I do regularly, I would fill them up to, the large jars I would fill up to here. These jars I would probably fill up to here. And I let them cool completely in the refrigerator before I put them in the freezer. And over the many years of doing that, I've only cracked maybe 2 or 3 jars in that time frame. So I thought that was pretty good. And I will let these cool before they go into the fridge. Put a lid on them. And I do usually add salt now, since I know what I'm going to do with them. I don't add it typically before because I don't know if I'm going to reduce it down, how I'm going to use it, and you don't want it to be overly salted before you know what the final use is. I like to get a little salt in there, stir it around, and there you have some beautiful broth that you can use for many things, from sauces to soups. You can freeze these into cubes and use those when you just want a little bit of broth or a cup of broth without taking up big jars of space. So it has a lot of versatility, and it's super easy, and it's pretty effortless. This is the piles of bones and the onion pieces that I'm going to sift through and discard the bones. I separated the bones and the onion pieces, the herb stems, the bay leaf, and the meat and cartilage pieces and the carrots for the dogs. So this whole bowl here is all dog food, and You think about, a lot of people just throw the bones away. If you keep the bones, you have a lot more use and more value from the bones. And if you don't have dogs, I guess this would be wasted, but if you have dogs, it's definitely something worth trying. After the broth is jarred, I wanted to show you what it looks like. The fat will be at the top and it provides a nice seal, kind of keeping this fresh. And there'll be a time where I could keep this in the fridge for about a week until I use it up, depending on what I've done. I like to use it for onion soup, as a soup base, also as a base for sauces. Now when I put it in the jar, this is when I'm going to use it for soups and things. So I wanted to show you what it looks like, show you the consistency. This is the fat, and sometimes I'll just skim this off and I will saute some onions in it or vegetables if I'm going to use this as a base. But I wanted to show you the consistency, and this is has very good gelatinous, and that's because of all of the collagen and things in the bones and the ligaments that were left on there. And this is a very good quality broth. So this is, excuse me, this is what you would be going for. A much thinner consistency would be that you had more water to bones ratio, and as you saw, I tried to pack the pot as much as possible. So even if you want it more gelatinous, use a smaller pot, and consider that if you want to achieve this. If you're just looking for a nice flavored broth that doesn't need to be this thick, then that's perfectly fine. But this is an example of a really high quality broth. So I just wanted to share that, and it's a delicious base for lots of home cooking, and well worth saving all your bones in the freezer so that you can maximize your budget and make the most of all of your meats and your farm fresh, hopefully pasture raised meats. And that concludes the bone broth. Enjoy.